Good morning and welcome to another exciting edition of Day 4 with the man Frank Scalish. Day 4, number 113. How we doing, Frank?
We are doing fine.
Recorded show today. I'm currently, hopefully, culling on Wheeler Lake in the 4th Bassmaster Open EQ of the 2023 season. But that is neither here nor there. We have a fantastic Day 4 today, and it's not going to revolve around a specific lure. It's not going to revolve around a specific time of the year, but it's going to include all of that stuff. We're going to talk about what is between the headsets, both of our headsets right now, aren't we?
We are. And this topic is absolutely fantastic, but it's a deep cavern to go into.
Self-loathing? Is that? Oh, sorry. Listen, I'm going to say, so like you would expect, what do I do? You would expect, you would have, well, what's another word for an expectation?
Notion.
A preconceived notion. That I like to wear fishing shirts underneath, right? Underneath my little, like I always wear a fishing shirt. But your preconceived notion in this case would be wrong. Because I'm actually wearing a t-shirt of a gangster cat with a bandana on it.
Outstanding.
That was a preconceived notion that most people probably had wrong, correct?
Correct. I absolutely included. See, that's why preconceived notions can get you in trouble when you're on the water. All right, you want to dive?
Let's take a deep. Let's just remember. So last week, like I said, recorded show this week. Last week we did announce that on day 4 that the color 7 in the spook is back.
It's back.
It sold out in 3 minutes the first time when you were in studio for the 100th show. There was a select few that got it. LureNet Pradco tried to make things right with all the people that were trying to get on and get it. And they were like, man, we wanted it. So they rushed it through. There's a long process for these baits. It's not like you just call up Jim on the other end and say, Jim, send us some more. Like it's a drawn out process.
It's a procedure.
So I will say this. There is a chance that we're a week in and there are none left. Is there not?
There's a chance that could happen. Yeah.
But there's also a chance that you could still go to lurenet.com, use
BTL 100
code BTL 100 to get 15% off through June 30th and get some color number 7s just in time for topwater season, which was last week's episode as well. So if you haven't watched last week's episode, go back and watch it. Frank goes through when, where, and why to start out your topwater selection of the year. But preconceived notions, Frank, the floor is yours.
Okay, so first of all, let's just clear the air. There's a big difference between your instincts and a preconceived notion. Your instincts are what takes place when you're on the water and you're trying to figure out a pattern and you make a decision change. You make a conscious choice to change based on your experiences. Versus a preconceived idea, you're forcing an issue. That's the main difference. So to try to force feed bass a lure choice, your lure choice, or force a pattern, it never works because the bass aren't doing that. That's why you're forcing it. Here's a really good example. In the bait school fishing videos that I do, there are times when we'll have a new lure come out or new colors in a body shape come out, and I have to go get a video based on the new stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes the new stuff comes out and it's before or after that particular pattern is going on lakes around me. Okay. So what happens is I go out with a preconceived notion that I got to go catch bass on this.
Mm-hmm.
And then I go out there and I try to make this work. And it's not working. but I stay with it because I'm trying to get a video to show the when, the how, the why, and the where of this. But if I'm wrong, it's never going to happen. That's a preconceived idea to force feed them something they don't want. It happens all the time. Yeah, I see it everywhere in practice for tournaments, fun fishing, especially guys who don't get a lot of time to go fishing. So they have one day to go. So they go, man, I remember 2 years ago, the flipping bite was crazy. Let's go flipping. And so they get their flipping stuff in their hands and they flip all day and they catch a couple of fish. And when in reality, if they would have backed off the cover and maybe threw intermediate baits right before the flipping cover, they might have had a banner day.
Just happened to me, Frank. Just fished a Sunday jackpot. And for the last 2 years, I fished it. And in May, you've been able to pitch shaky heads and small jigs up into the cracks and rocks on channel swings. And we caught 20, 25. Hadn't been out there. We had one day. We said, well, what are we going to do? Oh, well, they'll be in the cracks. We'll be able to pitch the cracks. We go out there. We pitch cracks for 3 hours. Catch one fish. Talked to my buddy who won it. He backed off a little bit. They didn't pitch the cracks. Our boat was where the fish were.
Exactly. That's a great preconceived idea example. That's absolutely great. So let's talk about, I don't know if I should call it a pattern for discovery or what to do. So I'm going to just break it down in ways you could avoid getting caught in that trap.
Okay. The preconceived notion trap where you think you're going to go out and catch them one way. It doesn't work. And this show is about recognizing that it's not working and then steps to take a day that was going to suck, that you know is going to suck, and turn it around into something productive.
Perfect. Because here, look, we've all been there, including myself. I've been there a bunch of times where I am so hell-bent that this is going to work and that I'm just not in the right place yet. You know what I mean? So I'm looking for that needle in the haystack instead of going where the percentages tell you to go. Like here, look, people always say, and I hear it a million times, there's always bass shallow. You can always catch bass shallow. Probably true for the most part. I'll bet it's true. But if you're looking for the bite and it's that big, wouldn't you rather be around the bite that's that big?
Absolutely.
So the point of the matter is we're talking percentages and putting all the percentages in your favor. Because with fishing, fishing's all about variables, especially tournament angling, by the way. Tournament angling, the guy who wins tournaments, the guy who does well in these events, they look at all the variables and they put as many variables in their favor as they can. Now, there's uncontrollable variables like weather and so forth, but you control all the variables around you, you do good in the tournament. And a preconceived idea or that particular variable is totally controllable, and you have to understand. People say, "Oh, I reacted on my gut." Your gut instinct is based on your fishing experiences. Most of the time, your gut's not wrong. But for those who don't have time to spend on the water all the time, their gut might be telling them a preconceived notion. So let's just go in there and let's break this pattern.
Is this an Ike and Ellie fish the moment type thing? Is this what fishing the moment means?
Yeah. Well, you know what? Yes, absolutely. And I'm guilty of it. I've been more guilty of it. Well, to be brutal, I've been more guilty of not fishing in the moment since I've been doing fishing videos.
Yeah, you've been forced to. That's how you came up with this. You said, hey, I got a great topic for this show. I was forced. I had to get content for this bait. So I was forced to go out and use this bait to get content. And you're like, but it led me the whole time I was out there. I was thinking, dude, this is what happens all the time. I'm getting that same feeling as a preconceived notion that leads
Correct.
you down the wrong path. All right, continue.
Correct. Okay, so we're going to break this. We're going to break this preconceived idea. So the first thing you're always going to look at is your seasonal pattern. What season is it? Because now everybody's seasons are different depending, geographically where you're located. Like down south, obviously, spring comes way earlier than it does up here. So you look at the seasonal pattern. Seasonal pattern is going to start to narrow down your search. That's all it does. It narrows down your search. Okay. So let's talk about this. Okay. Let me get my thought pattern here because I kind of went all over the board.
Yeah, that was kind of my fault there. I threw you.
That's okay. That's okay. All right. So seasonal patterns are very important. In the spring, you know what's about to take place or taking place. Okay. Spring is predicated around three things: pre-spawn, spawn, and post-spawn. And post-spawn, in my opinion, is really early summer, but that's another story. So when you look at that seasonal pattern, this gets you in a general area, and remember, some lakes will be behind seasonal pattern, some lakes will be in front of the seasonal pattern. Even lakes in your area, depending on the makeup. Like if you have a shallow, flat lake, it's probably going to be ahead of a deep, clear reservoir. It'll probably be a little bit ahead of that, even though they might be 40 miles apart from you. They could be a little bit different. And some lakes, some of the big reservoirs that you guys down south and in the middle of the country are fortunate enough to have, you can have different seasonal patterns going on at different sections of the lake. So you got to keep that in mind. The seasonal pattern will always get you in a place. And then you have to decide from there, are you in front of it or are you behind it? And that's how you start to look. That's how you start to break your practice down.
Or your just day on the water.
Or your day on the water.
So you can spend, it depends on how long you have, on how long you're going to do this for. You could spend 2 or 3 days figuring this out, or you could accelerate this process and say, all right, I'm going to spend until 10 a.m. trying to figure out what I think they're doing to avoid the preconceived notion instead of just picking up a bait and doing what I think they're doing. Then I'm going to be productive for the second three or the second 3 quarters. Then I'm going to be productive for 2/3 of the day because I figured out in the first third what they're doing instead of being unproductive for 3/3 of the day, which would be 100% of the day, which is how you have a sucky day.
Correct. So here's the rule of thumb. So you always start out what you think should be working based on season, and then you make your adjustments from there. So here, I'll give you the easiest example on the planet. Everybody knows it. The spawn. The spawn is probably the easiest of all the patterns, seasonal patterns to figure out. You think it's the spawn. So the first thing you're going to do is slide your boat up and start looking for bedders. Okay? So your clues are going to be really obvious. If there are no beds, it's pre-spawn because there's no beds. The other thing is, if you slide up there and you see beds and you see bass on the beds, it's the spawn. If you slide up there and you see empty beds, it's either post-spawn or early summer pattern. So you work before it, during it, after it. That's the easiest time of year ever to figure out what's going on. It's the spawning season, that springtime season. So if you're doing something and it's not working, everybody says, how long do you do that before you change? Well, the reality of it is, if if I'm fun fishing, hold on a second. My cat's tearing up a very important document.
I heard that.
Oh, yeah, hold on a second.
Well, you got, if the cat's part of the show, you got to bring Bama in. I want Bama to see my shirt today, Frank. Frank, Bama. Oh my gosh.
And these are my notes.
Oh my gosh. What the heck just happened?
If you have paper laying around, Bama will absolutely.
Are you in a pickle now because of that?
No, I'm just gonna unfold it all and rewrite down what I had written on there.
Okay. Sorry.
So I digress, and I apologize for that.
That's fine.
So we were talking about the spawn. So anyhow, this is so funny. This is so terrible, man. So anyhow, so then you make your adjustments from there. So basically, if what you're doing doesn't work, how long do you stay with it before you know it doesn't work?
That's the $1 million question.
Right. If you're on a lake that you've been on before and you know the potential of the lake, I gotta tell you, this is important. If you know the lake has fish and a lot of them, and what you're doing is not working, it doesn't take long to say what we're doing isn't working. It could take anywhere from 20 minutes to an hour, and you better be changing it up. Now, I know if I'm on Erie and I'm smallmouth fishing and I'm doing something and I'm not catching smallmouth, I know in 10 minutes it ain't working because they should be at this depth and I'm not catching them in this depth on some of the places that I have, then I got to find another depth to go to. It's no different. So the more familiar you are with the lake, the faster that adjustment can be made. But you have to be willing to make it when you get that, when you're not getting the response. Summertime is a little tricky because if you're early summer, there's basically summer. What you have is you have early summer, which I break down starting at post spawn. That's early summer. You have summer, and then you have the end of summer. Okay, the end of summer is probably the hardest thing on earth because everything's transitioning for fall, and they're not where they're gonna be in the fall, and they're not where they're supposed to be in the summer. That's probably the most difficult. But early summer, right after the spawn, that's easy because I'll start deeper and work my way shallower. So I'll pick a section, and this is important with all seasonal patterns, by the way. Pick a section of the lake that from your past experience has produced fish. And then work that seasonal pattern before or after. In other words, I'm going to take a section of the lake that has good spawning, good summer, good early summer stuff. Because now I can take a small section, cover that water real quickly, do my multitude of things as you would normally. Like if the spawn is over, I'm going to go to where they were spawning and I'm going to fish my way out until I run into them. Once I figure that out in the small section of lake I took, you could translate that to the rest of the lake. And you're fishing in the moment. You don't have that locked in idea and it's summer, I got to fish ledges and offshore humps and I didn't catch them on this one, so I'm going to fish every one of them. Well, if you're fishing offshore in the summer and you hit 10 places and one of those places doesn't work and you're not catching fish anywhere, then it's not working. But if you're fishing summer and you fish 10 offshore places and you catch fish on 2 of them, it's working because fish aren't everywhere all the time. So I guess what I'm trying to say is if you know what time of year the season is, you work in front of it, you work behind it, pick a very small section of the lake to establish what's going on in the rest of the body of water.
And you pick that section based on 112 other day 4s with Frank SCALISH, where you break down where they're supposed to be, what you're supposed to look for, all that, all that stuff. So you're putting all of the odds in your favor.
Right. And that's the whole key. That's really the whole key to keeping out of that rut. Um, if you're they're eating square bills, and then you go out and you square bill your brains out and you catch 2 fish. The information that you acquired is wrong. It's off, because if the pattern's working, it's working, and you're rewarded for it. So you have to understand that the fish might be in that square bill range, but maybe on that given day, you probably should have flipped a few of them blowdowns too. You know what I mean? So if I know the fish are from 6 feet to the bank, I'm going to have everything I can catch them on from 6 feet deep to the bank. And so I might square bill one blowdown, flip one blowdown. You know what I mean? Just to keep them honest, you got to keep them going. And that's going to help you narrow things down. Conversely, let's say you're flipping and you're catching 1.5 pounders, and you go, man, there's too many 3 to 5 pounders in this lake to be chasing 1.5 pounders. Well, maybe if you'd have tied the buzzbait on, you might have caught the bigger ones, or put a square bill on, you might have caught the bigger ones. So once you start to narrow the bite range down, now you can start to narrow the size of the fish you're catching down.
Preconceived notions then don't mean that you have to. What you're saying is you don't have to make drastic changes to turn your day around. What you're talking about are small changes. It's not like you're going to the other end of if you had been fishing top water in the north end, it's not like you're running to the south end and fishing 30 foot deep now.
Right. No.
That's key to what you're saying. You're still in that same deal. You're making small adjustments continuously until you make contact with what your target is.
Correct. There's times when conditions change. So for example, I was out doing a square bill video, and we had a mud line come in really bad. I was on a river. We had a mud line come in horribly.
Blown out water.
Blown out. Like you could literally see the chocolate cloud coming down the river. Woof, it comes in. The crankbite goes to hell. Like right now, goes to hell. So the big adjustment that I made was I picked up my flipping stick and started flipping. Because what do we know? The water was better conditions, was cleaner. It got dirty. The fish don't vacate. They just plow right next to that piece of cover, and they honker right down there. So now I had to get something down to where they were hiding. They weren't going to come out and chase it because they lost their sight factor. So now they're not coming out and chasing it. I got to put it right in front of their nose to get the bite. So the adjustment there was put that down, pick up the flipping stick. So there's little things that you got to pay attention to. You always pay attention to your environment, and you always pay attention to what the water's telling you. That's a big key. Some of the past episodes, like I remember early BTL episodes, we were talking about how do you know how deep to start fishing in the summer? And I said, well, you idle out when you're idling out from the boat launch. And you know how you idle out, and then all of a sudden you drop into the basin of the lake, or all of a sudden you're idling out and you see all these balls of shad in 15 feet of water. Well, that's telling you that the shad are using that 15-foot water column. That's telling me I got to concentrate on structure at that 15-foot level. So I'm paying attention to the clues that they're telling me, and to react on that takes that preconception out of the game, because now you're reacting on true to what the environment and true to what's going on in that particular body of water is telling you.
So you're taking notes of stuff the second you're getting to the lake, whether you're launching your kayak, whether you're fishing from the bank, whether you're in a high-end bass boat, you're taking little clues that are going to steer you away from going down the wrong path.
Correct.
Or
That's
change your
change your approach.
change your approach.
Right. And you have to. I mean, that's the whole if being a fisherman in general is like being a detective. You're always looking for clues. You're always looking for a change, and you're always looking for a pattern. That's the key. You're always looking for that pattern. So you're paying attention to everything around you. Like in the morning, you get up, you're driving to the lake, you see deer and turkey running around everywhere, squirrels doing their thing. Everything's moving in nature. You haven't even got to the lake yet. You better be aware that there's probably going to be a bite going on, because
And maybe a moving bait bite, an aggressive bite where you have bass that are
correct,
actively hunting because there's something with that barometric pressure that's
correct,
causing everything in nature to move, and fish are in nature.
absolutely. Same thing. If you go out there and you see nothing stirring, one, check the weather because you're probably in for it. But if you see nothing moving, everything's hunkered down, you could assume that you're going to have a more methodical approach. You're going to have to be right on top of the fish, and they're not going to be running around chasing your baits. So you got to hit them in the head with this stuff.
It's almost like what Rick Clunn talked about like, camping out in nature, to where you wake up in the middle of the night and you feel a drastic temperature change where it's been muggy the previous nights, and now all of a sudden it's crisp and the stars are out. And if you're in a sanitized, a hotel room or a house, you don't notice that. You don't notice the little changes, or perhaps a windstorm comes through for a couple hours in the middle of the night and might change, a bank or something like that. And you get up and it seems identical. And you're like, well, where the hell did these things go? Because you had a preconceived notion of where they would be, but you're just taking all these little cues that help put you more in the right zone.
Exactly. Exactly.
Okay. Let me ask you this, Frank, because this is something that I think a lot of anglers struggle with, me included. And I want to know if, in your opinion, it has to do with preconceived notion being hard-headed. Is you're on the water, you're struggling, you get that hopeless feeling. It's that feeling where you're like,
yeah,
I am not going to freaking catch him here. This is a freaking waste of time. We all have been there.
Oh, I've been there a million times.
Is that classic preconceived notion and being hard-headed, or are there some times where the fish just aren't biting, or when you get that feeling where it just doesn't feel like it's gonna freaking happen, do you push through it? Do you make changes? Do you reanalyze? Like, how do you get rid of that feeling? Because sometimes it's like an anchor, and it just plagues you the entire day. You're not enjoying it. You're not catching them. You're not fishing thoroughly. You're losing confidence with every cast. And then when you're fishing confidently, you're like, at any cast, you think it could happen. So how do you get rid of that feeling? Because I feel like it relates somewhat to this preconceived notion that you've been talking about for the majority of the show.
Yeah. And that's a thought pattern that is crippling on the water. I went through that a period of time. And that's absolutely crippling. So the minute I put in my head that this isn't working and I am not going to catch them, I will reanalyze. I will put everything away and start from scratch and do nothing that I was doing. I will absolutely do nothing that I was doing, because you have to, when that feeling comes over you, you have to totally reevaluate. Now, if that feeling comes over you and you've only been doing one thing all day, throwing a spinnerbait, you could have just been completely misjudging the fish behavior, and you probably rolled over good areas. But if you were doing a myriad of things throughout the day, then you got to stop and you got to go, I'm in the wrong water column, or I'm in the wrong part of the lake. Because I have seen on some of the bigger reservoirs, Norman is notorious for this. Sections of the lake will be on and sections of the lake will be off. And so you have to understand that about the lake you're on. I have seen other lakes where if you're running a pattern, you can catch them anywhere doing that pattern. So this is when knowing your body of water is important. If you go somewhere, mostly it affects tournament guys and not weekend guys, or guys that can only fish a few times a month, because those guys usually fish close to home. But the tournament guy experiences a myriad of different lakes throughout the season, all across the country. So at that point, you have to understand every body of water that you're on. And when that feeling gets in your head, you have to make a complete about face, 100%.
Even if what you go and do is not the right thing, just the fact that it's different in a different part of the lake helps clear your mind and give you a new outlook. And maybe you see some factors in that water, in that clues you in on the right direction. Yeah, because clearly you're no longer an active participant in it when you get that hopeless feeling. You're just out there going through the motions.
Right. You're giving all your money away is what you're doing at that point. So here, for example, like, remember back in the old days, the big thing, well, you might be too young. No, you were in the game long enough. Flybys, rent a plane, fly over the lake.
Yeah.
Rent a helicopter, fly over the lake.
See where the water clarity is, see where the points come out. This is before Google Earth.
Right, exactly. And so what would happen is you would do a flyby. So you would run to the beginning of the lake, and it's all blown out mud. And then you would fly over the lake, and you would see where the transition stopped, where it started to get cleaner. And so if the bass wanted that moderately stained water with still clarity but not crystal clear, like up at the dam, you would go, I'm fishing in that section of the lake. And then you run down there and you fish in that section. Well, if you don't fly over, which is not something you can do easily these days, if you don't do a flyover, you have to physically see the water. So if you're at one section of the lake and it's not going on, you need to hop in your boat and take a run. You need to start looking for something that is different from where you were at, because that's probably the key.
After you've worked through the making sure you're not throwing a spinner bait and going through them, if the pressure dropped, or if there's no bait fish present and they're on, or if there maybe is a bluegill spawn going on that you missed and you're dragging, and a lot of the fish are up keyed on that. So once you do that, you're like, they just ain't biting today. That's when it's time to kind of reset.
Right, because here, I'm going to tell you, I got a philosophy, and I tell this to Junior all the time. You could be having the worst possible day on that lake, and on that very same day, some dude is going, isn't this the best lake on the planet?
Dude, that's what Christy told me about Grand. I was covering an FLW event back there, and he said there is no such thing as the fish just aren't biting. He goes, Grand is too good, has too many fish, and has too many different sections in it. He said, you're just in the wrong section if you're not getting bit, and it's time you go find the section, because somewhere someone's freaking clobbering him going, this is a freaking best day I've ever had out here. He goes, and you can't chalk it up to, it's not my fault that I'm not catching them. It's the fish's fault that they're not biting. No, there's always someone that's catching them.
Yeah.
Except for extreme circumstances.
Right. I mean, extreme, but
like
when you
Pittsburgh Classic type stuff.
Yeah. Well, exactly. That's nobody's fault but the place they went. But exactly. Like, here, I'll give you a great example. The other day, I was on Lake Erie the other day, and I chose a section of the lake that hasn't given up good smallmouth in quite a while. Quite frankly, you almost can't win there anymore. And Frankie and his buddies went on the lake, and they went to a different section of the lake. I struggled like mad to catch them, but I was looking for the needle in the haystack, but I knew that going in on it, that I was looking for the needle in the haystack. Conversely, now Lake Erie is probably a bad example because it covers like 4 states and all of Canada. But this is probably a terrible example, but I chose a section of the lake on purpose, because I had a theory. The theory worked one day a couple weeks ago, but didn't work the other day at all. Well, I know guys that were in different sections of the same lake that I was on. They were killing them. Okay, so you could theoretically really be in the wrong section of a lake, and that's why when you start to get that, oh shit, I'm just going to be casting all day feeling again, you need to move. You have to mix it up. You got to go somewhere completely different. Obviously not so far away from that seasonal pattern,
right?
But somewhere different in the lake.
I know guys, and I've done it before, who, you're out there, you got limited time. It's go, 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 go. And they're like, they just need a minute and they need a reset. And that's idling out to the middle, sitting down, retying a couple rods, eating a sandwich, taking a drink, putting some rods up that haven't worked, and intentionally clearing their mind.
Yeah,
and
100%.
It takes 5 or 10 minutes. And instead of just go, 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 and you never do that, you go out, you chill out for a second, you take some deep breaths, you drink, and then when you go back up, you're looking at it completely differently. I have done that multiple times in the opens when I've been struggling. Is all right, let's get some of these rods off the front deck. Let's eat a sandwich. Let's drink a Gatorade. Let's peruse the map while we just drift across the middle of the lake in the tournament. And it's amazing how that clears a lot of preconceived notions out of my mind. I'll run into a random area and I'll basically start from scratch.
Yeah, exactly. And sometimes that's the best thing to do. I've done that too, by the way, where I'm just getting my brains kicked in all day and nothing is working. I just do the same thing. I'll just start putting stuff away and I'll float around, and then, let the thoughts come when they come, refigure it out, go somewhere else and start over again. Sometimes that's the best way to go about it. In fact, it's almost the only way to go about it.
All right, let's talk about baits for a second here, because when it comes to preconceived notions, I've gotten bit a lot, and my preconceived notions are typically an unusual bait, be it a glide bait or a different topwater, or, oh, I bet they'd really eat that here. When you're trying to get over preconceived notions, is it not better to reset and to try to find the fish with baits that are proven baits that work under a variety of different circumstances, instead of using something weird or something? I mean, we're talking a like a Texas rig, a crankbait, something that is going to catch bass and not some newfangled thing.
Yeah, dude, that is 100% on the money. When you're struggling and you're trying to figure it out, that's not the time to reach for something you've never done before, because that could just add fuel to your fire. You have to, you know what baits you catch fish
like
on.
If you catch a fish on a wacky rig, 5-inch yum dinger in green pumpkin, you need to, and you're completely lost out there, and then that's an appropriate bait. You need to have that tied on.
Yeah,
when you're trying to reestablish or reconnect with these fish.
Absolutely. You absolutely
like
should.
What are your confidence baits that when you're struggling, you're not trying to shoot a show or anything,
right?
Just let's do this time of the year, this May time. What are your confidence baits that when you're struggling, trying to reconnect the fish, you went out, it's not happening? What are you going when you reset the 3 or 4 things that you're going to always have tied on in the vast majority of lakes and circumstances?
Okay, this time of year for me up here, and not Lake Erie.
Yep.
We have to leave Lake Erie out of it, because we're leaving it out. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to have my flipping stick out for sure, and I'm going to have a spine craw or a lizard on it. I'm definitely going to have a 5-inch dinger out. And for me, it's usually going to be wacky rigged or on a flick shake head. For sure. I'm definitely going to have a spinnerbait out. I'm definitely going to have a chatterbait out. And then I'll probably, because it's me and I love crankbaits, I'll probably have a shallow running crankbait out. Square bill, if I'm fishing a lake that's got a lot of cover in it, if I'm fishing a lake that's, you know, more open, more structured lake, let's say, I don't want to say coverless, but coverless for the most part. I'll have something like a big O on, something that I can hit the bottom with in 4 feet of water, but then I can run it in the free water zone. So if I'm paralleling an edge, I know that it's getting down 4 feet and I can keep it, you know, suspending, so I can get the fish that might be off of that break. Okay. That'll tell me things. If I start catching fish that are off the break, not relating to the bottom, then I'm going to put the jerk bait in my hand. So that's pretty much this time of year what I got cooking.
Okay.
I will have a buzz bait on also, but a small buzz bait. I won't go to a big buzz bait yet.
That's good stuff. We don't talk about this a lot. I mean, we talk about it in a roundabout way, but not directly. It's a lot easier to be like, hey, I just organized my spinnerbait box and now I'm going to catch it more. But this is just as important.
Yeah, and the crazy thing about this, okay, this is this topic is something that most anglers don't want to cover, because every angler wants to think that they're good, and every angler wants the proof that they're good. And it doesn't mean they're bad anglers if you have a block, if you have a preconceived notion that you get stuck on. It doesn't mean you're a bad angler. It means you're having a bad day or a bad moment. And you can change that, but you have to recognize it to change it. That's the whole key.
What else we got for today? We didn't even show a bait hack or tip, and I like it. We haven't had a mental, a day 4 mental episode yet.
No, you know, the mental side of the game is the side of the game that most people don't want to talk about. We won't belabor the point, but in my tournament fishing career, my first season on the pro tour, the elites, was fantastic. I think I cashed a check in every event but 2, made the classic. It was fantastic. My next season was not so good.
I think it's because you started to get preconceived notions, because you'd kind of been around the country. There are a couple familiar lakes. You knew more guys. They're like, hey, this is what's going to be going on here. And instead of just rolling in and fishing the conditions, you now thought, hey, I've got an idea of what I need to do here. And then the suck bust.
Right. I got in my head. I absolutely got in my head. And that's the problem. I stopped fishing and started casting. And that's what you don't ever want to do as an angler. You can practice casting in your backyard. When you're on the water, you have to fish. And when you fish, that means you're paying attention to everything. So it took me literally about a season and a half to get out of that funk. And it was horrible. It was absolutely horrible. And then when I got out of the funk, then everything started to gel again. And I remembered why I love to fish. And that's because I love to catch them. And so once that happened, I kept an open mind and wasn't afraid to make an adjustment. Now, I said an adjustment because you have to constantly tweak the game out. And so that was the big thing. But the mental game of fishing is probably, as any professional sport, the mental aspect of it is crucial. But in our sport, I think the mental aspect of it can make you or break you. And that's a fact.
And that is why next week's show, Uncle Frank for an hour will talk about dealing with anger issues when it comes to other boaters, hole poaching, and co-anglers.
We're going to take this, go to a whole new level, guys.
That would have to be your weakness, wouldn't it?
That's my kryptonite.
Outside influences impacting your day.
Oh yeah, that's my kryptonite. Because I don't listen to Doc Talk anymore.
Mm-hmm.
I gave that up a long time ago. But that's my kryptonite. I will choose the worst part of the lake to stay away from people, which is really bad.
You would rather struggle through a poor bite and try to find something that doesn't get the vein going down the side of the neck in a productive area.
Right, but I can do that, Matt, because I'm not competing anymore.
You'll trade bites for zen.
That's right. For that, find my happy place.
All right, this has been another edition of Day 4, episode number 113.
We're climbing.
With a calm, happy, and open-minded Frank Scalish. We'll see everybody next week. Later.